Maybe it started with my mother, who, like most black parents, could only hear me through the sound of her own voice. Or maybe it started with my great-grandmother, who stifled my mother's emotions so much they flooded into me. Or maybe it was my father, who lived his whole childhood dangling from the voice of his father and sought for me to sway in a similar way initially. We only know how to love the ways we are loved or the opposite. So maybe I learned the opposite. I grew up around a love so strong it rendered me invisible. Or maybe it had nothing to do with family. Maybe it was the white girl in third grade who told me I was unattractive because I was dark-skinned. Or maybe it was all the jokes wrapped around my throat in middle school. Or maybe it was the first time a set of hands showed me that honoring my consent was optional. Or the first time I expressed a need that was ignored. Or the first time I was asked to explain my want for safety. Or the first person I felt safe with after that, choosing another's body for comfort. Or maybe it's prophecy. I was born with an umbilical cord cuddling my neck, and maybe that's prophetic environment. I mean, isn't numbing just another kind of asphyxiation? I've heard this depression will challenge my self-love, but isn't numbing one of the most radical forms of self-love? To care for myself so much that I stop myself from feeling pain again?
Good day. My name is Quadrice Glass, and I'll be answering a few questions today. So the first question that was asked of me is, as a black man, what are some things that I struggle with? And I think I know one of the biggest struggles that I have is self-consciousness. I believe that black men, specifically in this country, have a very interesting history with the public eye. And so we are often viewed and expected to perform in a certain way. And over the years, through socialization, through personal socialization, but also through watching others and being socialized in that way, I've become very self-conscious about how I move and how I act. And it's really anchored in how I might perceive others to perceive my actions. So one of my struggles is self-consciousness. A little bit less these days than what it used to be.
So first question, what would you say is one of your greatest struggles as a black man? I would say, in my experience with life, I've had isolated experiences where, being of my skin complexion came into question when dealing with something. But I've never really had any major struggles as far as defined by the color of my skin. I would say my biggest struggle that I have for myself personally and mentally is, teaching and educating other black men that it's okay to learn how to be a product of their environment without becoming like their environment. So avoiding all of the stuff that comes in, especially if you grow up in an urban community, it's easy to fall in line with what everyone else that you see around you is doing. So that's what I would say is my main struggle.
I guess one of my greatest struggles being a black man today is trying to belong in a world that necessarily doesn't want me here. I guess I could also say that another struggle is just trying to maintain my own image and trying to separate myself from like a stereotype that was given to us over the years. And it's not hard to do, but I feel like depending on your environment, I think that's what makes it hard.
Y'all, so I'm not a man or anything, but I definitely have black men in my family and in my circle that struggle every day. And so one of the main struggles I saw was like black men having this mentality where they have to work to skin fall out their bones to provide for their family. And it's like, I thought it took a village to raise a child. You don't have to do all of that. Like, it's okay to receive help. It's okay to ask for help. Like, that's one of the main struggles that I saw. If you know anyone in your community, in your family, in your circle that have struggles, drop the comments below.
Second question are stereotypes that I've encountered as a black man. And at first, when I heard this question, because I often don't, I try not to concern myself too much with the perceptions of other races, people outside of black people. But then I started thinking a little bit more deeply about it, and two instances popped up, and them being intellectual in nature. The first one was when I was a student in high school, and I went to a predominantly black high school. Majority of the educators in the high school were black, but there were a few white teachers. But there were also this was also a Afrocentric high school, and Afrocentric high school meaning that it was regarded as this the center of the development of black minds and a black personality and of black character. And in some light it was, but it regressed in some ways. And so when I was in high school, I had an English teacher, and I wrote a paper, and after he graded the paper and I got the paper back, he pulled me aside outside of class, and he said, Glassy, because that's what he called me Glassy. He said, Glassy, um, this paper doesn't sound like you. And I was a little stumbled, and I'm like, what do you mean it doesn't sound like me? And what he was getting at, it was that it was too well written, um, that it didn't sound like something that I would produce. So that was in high school. And then in college, I encountered that same thing and with another English class, and this was with a white woman. And on the paper that she gave back, there were so many words circled. She was like, where did you get this from? Like, how did you think of this? Like, where did this idea come from? And then another encounter in college was with the chair of the religion department, older white woman, and I was in her office because I was expressing a grievance about an issue that I was having in a class that she wasn't even the professor of. And in the midst of our exchange, she called me angry and unprofessional. Maybe because of the tone of my voice, that it probably got a little rough and rugged. Um, and so they are just some of the stereotypes that I've encountered, right? Being angry, being unprofessional, but also not being too intellectually sound.
Question two: what are two stereotypes you've heard of from other races directed at black men? I would say one of the stereotypes that I've often heard is if you grow up in an urban community and you're a man, you're just going to be a drug dealer. And there's no ifs, ands, buts about it. That's what you're viewed as. You're out there, you're going to be in the streets, you're going to be a part of that life. And that's a main stereotype that I've heard. The other one comes, I would say, sports related. Black men are bigger, faster, stronger. So they're more capable of being those sports figures. And, looking at how different sports, particularly football, view black men, especially in the draft process, is very closely related to the slave process of selling slaves. So, if you really look at the NFL draft process and what they do, it's very much in line to how they used to have that process going with slaves back in the day.
Stereotypes directed towards black men. I haven't really heard a lot because usually when it comes to stereotypes, they bunch us into one category. So African Americans are just one. I've never really ran into anything like that, but I could say there's a prime example, a black exploitation film that came out a long, long time ago. It portrayed the black man as like over sexualized, like they made us seem like very sex crazed over like white women or just women in general. Like we needed sex, like sex was like our driving force, like our life force.
So, what are our thoughts so far, with stereotypes concerning black men? I know I've definitely heard of black men being over sexualized and them having to be like a product of their environment a little too much. Also, I've heard of like them having to be like so good at sports, also having to watch sports because I guess if you don't watch sports, you're not a man. And them like, being obsessed with like white women. So yeah, what are some thoughts or some stereotypes that you've heard or encountered? And, let me know in the comments.
Third question, in thinking about the pros of being a black man, I've always said that amidst all of the things that I've personally encountered as being a black man and that I've seen and experienced vicariously through other black men, that I love being a black man. That there's not too much, there's nothing that I would change or give. Um, but some of the more direct pros is that my mind is creative, um, and I have this determined spirit and drive where I feel like I can do and I can accomplish anything without a moment's haste. Um, and I can figure my way out of any problem. It might take me some time depending on the problem and depending on the situation, but I can figure my way out of it, and I can devise some kind of plan or some kind of solution. One of the cons or one of the pressures of being a black man is that, going back to my initial struggle, the self consciousness, we are often burdened by other people's expectations that a black man should be this, and a black man should be able to do that, and this a black man should look like this, and a black man should carry himself this way. But it's a burden because these conceptions, and which are really misconceptions, of black men, are typically informed by imperialist and colonialist and white supremacist ideals of blackness, right? That are really anchored in slavery. Like, even some of the things that you have to take on everything, that you have to work, 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 work. A lot of these can be remnants of slavery and of servitude. Um, and so those expectations, those social expectations of others that are projected onto the black male body, are burdensome. Can be very burdensome, but still wouldn't change it for the world. Being a black man for the world.
Question 3. What do you think are two pros and two cons of being a black man? Now this one gets a little tricky for me. I don't really have any pros or cons to pinpoint because of the way I view myself. There can be issues with people hating me or misunderstanding me because of the color of my skin, but personally I don't care. So that never affects me. So that could be viewed as a con by somebody, but it's not to me because I don't really care. The pros, I just love myself, and that's regardless of my skin color. I just love me, and I don't really look at the positive or negative aspect of what other people may view me as. I'm 100% comfortable and confident in my skin, and whatever anyone else feels or thinks about me, I could care less about, as long as I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing the right thing, being a good person. That's what's more important to me. So I don't really have any pros or cons to directly pinpoint as to this question. I'm just me, period.
Two pros and cons directed towards that I feel that comes with being black. Two pros, I guess I could say, is I have history. I come from a place in Africa. I don't know where I come from, but I'm a part of some tribe that has culture, and that makes me feel like I always have a home. Another pro would be the color of my skin. People look at black as bad sometimes, but I look at it as a color of a king. My color is talked about in the Bible, so things like that is like a pro to me. A con would be the stain that's left from history about my skin that a kid born today in 15 years, when he learned about racism and everything, he'll learn that like African Americans were like brutalized in the United States. Another con would be that it's a rat race. It's a rat race for my skin complexion. We have to prove that we belong more than any other race. I feel like nothing comes easy. I'm not saying it's supposed to be easy, but we don't have a handout.
Right, child. So I don't really think that I can speak much on this particular question. I feel like this is strictly from a black man's perspective, and obviously I can't give that. But let me know what you guys thought of their responses in the comments below.
In terms of my mental health and ways that I were taught to deal with my mental health, I don't think I was ever explicitly taught that, oh, this is how you should deal with your mental health, or if you're feeling stressed or if you're feeling burdened or overcome, this is what you should do. So I kind of stumbled my way into modalities and modalities for healing. And two of the ways that I still to this day learn to deal with stress and overwhelm and just everyday shit is through writing, and it's through engaging and being in the outdoors, whether that is taking a walk, sitting outside, um, sitting in the tree, going to the park, and writing, whether it is writing a poetry. That was my first outlet, is writing, is through writing poetry, writing stories, building characters, just something to get the ideas in my head jogging and moving. Forms of expression. But they are definitely tools and key tools that I found that work efficiently for the preservation of your sanity.
Question 4. In what way were you taught to deal with your mental health? Now that one right there, that's when it gets a little tricky, because typically, stereotypically, however you want to say it, in the black community, talking about mental health is like taboo. You just can't talk about that topic. You can't talk about it, especially as a man. You can't talk about your feelings and stuff that happened to you, or you looked at like you saw for you a sucker, whatever the case is. And so, just growing up, whatever happens in the house, it stays in the house, and that was pretty much the mentality behind it. But as I've grown up, I could care less about that mentality, because a lot of stuff affects all of us, especially as a child growing up, as a man growing up. A lot of things affect us that we don't know how to deal with because we're pretty much told not to deal with it. So, I've learned how to forget about everything that I was taught growing up, everything that I learned growing up, and learn how to relearn things for myself. So I go to therapy, I go to counseling. It helps. And, looking at it from a religious or spiritual perspective, when you're in the church or you're connected to a specific religion, you're asked or spoken of or told to, go to God and talk to God and let God deal with those things. Like, yes, that is a major thing. Praying and talking to a spiritual leader is great, but at the same time, God gifted people to be therapists and counselors to really help with situations, because they have a different kind of understanding and look at things in a different perspective that can be beneficial. So, everything about keeping those skeletons in the closet and all, man, y'all gotta free yourself from that stuff and be healed, and learn how to be healed, and learn how to talk about painful topics. And stuff is going to hurt when you talk about it, but it's the only way to actually grow and get better through those things. So the things that I've learned is not how I operate today.
I was always taught to be tough, which is kind of why I think I have the mentality I have now. I never went through depression, and if I have, it only lasted like a split second, maybe 30 minutes. I learned to talk myself through things, and I guess because my grandparents and my dad didn't want me to be that guy that's suicidal. They didn't want me to be that guy that couldn't problem solve. So I was always taught that, like, you need to figure things out on your own. You can't get down on yourself. If something happens, figure out your next move. Don't stay stagnant, and just keep pushing. So in terms of mental health, I've never really had a problem with it. But I guess by me not having a problem with it, it also led me to dealing with other people's mental health. I guess by me growing up the way I grew up and dealing with my own problems, I learned to take on other people's problems and talk them through it and give them advice and be that listening ear that sometimes that people don't have. I'm not going to sit back and say that I'm perfect and say that, oh, I never had problems. I never had issues or anything, but I honestly never got to a point when I got overwhelmed because I was always able to calm myself down. I was always able to think things through. And I didn't have a home life that was like, I didn't have a barbaric home life. I know a lot of people go through a lot of things. I didn't have that. I was very active in church growing up. I was very active in my community growing up. Basketball, football, boxing. Like, I did a multitude of things growing up. And I know, like, none of those things can stray you away from mental health. But I never really had like those problems. Like,
Hey y'all, so when it comes to this mental health stuff, I'm gonna have something to say, but I'm gonna keep it to a minimum. I think it's barbaric that people are not taught, including myself, how to deal with mental health. I feel like, with childhood trauma, PTSD, like adulting, it is difficult and it's a heavy load that you should not be carrying by yourself. And so I feel like, each one teach one. And let's get through together. So how are some ways you were taught to deal with your mental health, and if you weren't taught, how did you learn how to deal with your mental health?
In terms of my thoughts on black boys engaging in premature sexual relationships with older people, I'm totally against it. It's one of the, it's one of the hot topics that I felt very close to since I was younger. Like, I'm 20, 24 now. Um, but since I was in middle school and in high school, and then when I would hear my peers talking about just their sexual acts and their sexual innuendos and messing with this person and talking to this person, what you did with that person, I always steered clear of talking about my sexual endeavors. I never really thought that was public information. That was not something that I shared at the lunch table. Um, but I also don't think it's a badge of honor to engage, or I equally don't think it's a badge of honor to engage in sexual acts with someone that's older than you. It is something that's pushed, and it's something that is regarded as you the man. Like, damn, you got her, you did that, oh, you the man. But I don't think so. If we're thinking about pre-13, right, maybe even pre-21, maybe even pre-25, you might not even really came into your full sexuality or understanding of your sexuality yet, and what it means to be a sexual being, and what it means to be a sexual being in your body and with your parts, and what you want to do with your body and with your parts and things of that nature. Um, and so the basis that you're operating from at a young age, if you're engaging in sex, is typically from somebody else's standpoint, what someone else and other people want you, how other people want you to act and other people want you to perform. So until you have a solid understanding or a working understanding of who you are, what it is you like, and how you like it, and when you like it, I don't think it's cool. And older people typically have that understanding of their sexuality. That's why they typically pursue younger people. It's manipulation, exploitation, right? It's all of these different forms of control that are unfair. I believe that we as a people, meaning those who govern community, govern children, we need to be aware of these things, and we need to be aware of how we are raising up our children, and then the mindsets and the mentalities that we are instilling in them, right? So I'm also an educator, right? So I'm an educator, I'm a uncle, I'm a brother, I'm a soon to be father, I'm a son, right? I'm all of these things. And in all of these different roles, I'm a cousin. In all these different roles, I have different governance responsibilities in governing children and governing children's minds. And so in these roles, I think that it's incumbent that I'm instilling in these youth like what it means to love and respect self, and to study to know thyself before you attempt to even give yourself to another, or to allow another to engage with you as you engage with yourself, right? um, so I do think it's vile. I do think it's a nasty cycle that needs to be interrupted. um, but I think it falls on both sides of the coins, right? It falls on the sides of those who are doing the predatory acts, but it also falls on the side of those who are governing those who are being preyed upon, right? Even if this is not your biological child, if this is your young boy, if this is somebody you bringing up, if this is somebody you building with, if this is somebody you instilling with, how are you also building up their sexuality? How are you also building up their sense of self? How are you also raising up their morale? And this is just beyond black girls, because I think we as a society often focus a lot on the sexuality of black girls and trying to protect and preserve and coddle it and keep it safe. But black boys are often neglected in that arena, right? Black boys are often left to fend for self. And so when you're left to fend for self, when you don't know thyself, a lot of things become lost.
Last thing, number 5. Black boys are often forced or heavily pressured to engage in sexual activities with older women and men. And this is usually seen as cool or okay, but in all actuality, it's rape. What are your thoughts? Rape is rape. Pedophilia is pedophilia. I mean, people try to make it seem like it's a rite of passage for a young boy that's a teen or something to have sex with an older woman. That's sick. I mean, it's sick. It's always been sick. It is always going to be sick. It's not cool at all. And, even from my perspective, as a man growing up, when I was a teenager in high school, and girls would be like 14, 15, my age, and they got dudes coming to pick them up that's in their 20s, and that's their man. Like, yo, no, that's sick. Like, it's just sick, like, for real. And, looking at it from the reality of it, we're pretty much put in a position culturally, overall, and society may have an impact on that as well, but we're put in a position to look at things like that as a rite of passage, as becoming a man, or being a real woman even though you're a teen. And yes, females mature much faster than males, but it's still not okay. It's just not okay. And whoever thinks it's okay, it's something wrong with them. Like, it's no way you can truly look at that situation and think it's okay. And even going a little further on that topic, growing up with the kissing cousins mentality, and people talking about that, like, that's the kind of stuff that, no, that's not okay. Like, it's not cool. So, we really got to get to a place where we stop just going back through cultural and societal and traditional things that really are a negative thing. It's sin, for one, and it's wrong. So we got to get to a place where we stop looking at those types of things and those types of situations as something that's cool or okay or a rite of passage, because that's not. And you can look at different African countries and tribes who have real life rites of passage that don't involve that kind of nonsense. So things must be changed for things to get better. And it starts with the mind and people really looking and thinking at things on a different level.
Okay, so this is my response to black boys being pressured or just coerced into having sex with older women at a young age, and like how the question stated how it was like highly praised when it's actually a form of rape. And what are my thoughts on it, being a black man, or just being a man in general? Because I feel like with this question, it isn't really a color thing. It's really just it's a man thing, I guess you could say. Funny story. I was 19 years old. It was my second year at IUP, so this was probably 2016 when I was on main campus at Indiana University. I met a white woman up there. I won't say her name, but she was 56. She was married, and I guess I was 19 at the time. I met her on a dating site. I think it was called Meet Me. It was like this joint I used to go on in Philly too, and just like talk to random girls around the city and all that. I met her on there. The first night we met, the first night we talked, I had just got out of class. It probably was like 6 o'clock. And she messaged me. We going back and forth, and we decided to meet that night. It's probably like 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night. She came and picked me up from my dormitory, took me to her house. We talked, laughed, joked. Her thing was, that she never been with a black guy before, a black male, and she always wanted to and never got a chance to. So I guess I was like the chance, I guess you could say. And one thing led to another. We engaged in sexual relations, and it didn't just stop there. It was from that night, which was probably roughly semester starting in August, so roughly like the middle of September. And I think me and her kept it up until 2017 of 2017 of March or April. And she would give me money every week. I think she was giving me something like $300 a week, just like spending money just to have. She let me drive her car around, like things like that. And to answer your question, I guess if you ask any other guy, they wouldn't tell you it was rape, because it wasn't about rape or manipulation. It was about like I said, being a man, like things that we go through, things that we have to experience just to have the experience. Now, I feel like if the shoe was on the other foot, 19-year-old girl having sexual relations with a 56-year-old man is frowned upon. It's okay for a girl to deal with somebody closer to her age, but not somebody that's old enough to be her father. Oh, she was old enough to be your mother. And yeah, because my mother is actually my mom's actually 47 right now, so, and she was older than my mom at the time. But it's not a bad thing, I guess I could say, because the age of consent is 18 and up when you can consent. I guess the age gap is what the problem is. But I guess that's my thoughts on it. It's really just, it's not problematic. And would I want my own kids to go through it? No. But like I said, it's like an experience thing. It's like something that you have to go through. Not saying everybody's going to go through it, because even a lot of my friends, when I tell this story, a lot of them never had what you would call, quote unquote, a sugar mom, or has ever laid in bed with somebody that's 20 plus, 30 plus years older than them. It's not really a heard of thing. It's like a very rare thing that happened in my life. So like, I don't take pride in it, but like when I do talk about it, it's kind of like, well, yeah, it happened. Like, what you want me to do about it?
Hey y'all, so what do we think about this last question? Because honestly, it's giving master manipulation and very much predator, as they used to say. All right, a little dark humor. If you know, you know. Anyway, so yeah, what are your thoughts? Have you ever been in this situation? If you haven't, do you know someone who's been in this situation? If you don't know anyone and you haven't been in a situation, if you were put in this situation, what would you say? What would you do? Definitely want to hear from you guys. I hope that you've enjoyed this documentary, and I hope to see you in the next one. Okay, bye.
What's good? I go by Enoch the Poet, and this poem is titled Supplantation. Raw, black, lustful, curved spine and soft skin, hard shell cancer, bald-headed Medusa, stared at my reflection so long I stoned myself. Dry-eyed bastard child of Northside Wilmington griot, of a broken home thug with a pen, black Uchiha, last of my lineage, masochist, recovering, bourbon-bodied, fire-throated, scorched-skinned West African descendant planted, country-watered in the city garden, raised on cornmeal pancakes and scrapple. Raised on cloudy water and 40 ounces and Jesus Christ and crack rocks and New York fried chicken on Market Street and Pete's Pizza and Easy Mart, while I used to steal hot pickles in AI Middle, where dude punched a girl in the face for taking a seat in social studies with Mr. Martin, wore dress shoes with no socks and shot the fair one with Jerron because he got tired of the ashy ankle jokes where the cops was called. A few times. With Eric, thought I was weak because I let niggas clown me, and he found out the hard way my hands was faster than my comebacks, where most niggas thought I was angry, but at that age, anger is usually just emotions we ain't been taught to process. Because our parents weren't taught to process. And their parents weren't either, and how could they be? I come from a household where silence was tradition. You don't have a teary eye unless you're in front of a casket, where a boy much older than me killed a piece of me 3 rooms down from Auntie's room, and I ain't go back to that house until her funeral almost 20 years later, and it was still silent there. And I was still silent there. But I've gotten better with speaking now, and I've gotten better with anger now, and I see emotions, and I name them, and I make space for myself, and some of my friends see me for me, and some of my friends don't, and I make peace with that. In my own way, I make peace, and I'm doing better, and I'm doing better, and I'm doing better, and I'm paying attention to who loves me the right ways and spending less time complaining about who don't. And I say we when I talk to my niggas about anything, because if one of us go through it, then we all do. That's how family work. And when I say family, I mean the ones I chose. Life is all about choosing and listening. And listening before you choose, and unconditioning, and freedom is mostly about freedom, the freedoms you give, the freedoms you get, and the freedoms you take back, because they were always yours to begin with.
I'm a young black man doing all that I can to stand. Oh, but when I look around and I see what's being done to my kind every day, I'm being haunted as prey. My people don't want no trouble. We've had enough struggle. I just want to live. God protect me.